All right, welcome back to the AI Management Workshop. Today, we are going to dive deep into something specifically for Gen Z because I was recently asked a question by a neighbor that is Gen Z. So he asked, what advice do you have for Gen Z? And the only thing I could think of, and this was related to careers, I said, there's anything that I would advise Gen Z is to learn how to process map. And he said, well, what's that? So I explained to him, but that's the intent of what I want to share with you here. Yes, we are going to use logic. We are going to use AI. We're going to combine the two. But there's a very important reason that I mentioned process mapping, and that's because there's a lot of fear out there that I hear about AI taking over our job. There's a lot of concern as to what are we going to do if AI does everything. But let me give you an example of a conversation that I had with a close friend of mine last night. And it highlights a few different things, and it highlights why everyone, I believe, should calm down about the implementation of AI, because you have to remember that it's not always right. It's only as good as the inputs, the controls, and the mechanisms that you use to get the best output. So as I was talking to my friend last night, she said she wanted to go on vacation and she used ChatGPT to plan out her vacation. And she wanted to go to Argentina, Buenos Aires, Argentina specifically. And she told me that the AIs told her to route her flight from LA to Madrid and then to Argentina. And I thought, that makes absolutely no sense. Why would I go to Europe my reaction to her was, Argentina is near Antarctica. She said, what? What are you talking about? It's only an hour time zone difference from LA. And I said, that's also wrong. Where are you getting this from? She then sent me the response that the AI gave her, and it literally said that Buenos Aires was 1 hour time difference from LA. She showed me that the routing of the flight was indeed a 10-hour flight from LA to Madrid, and then like another 10-hour flight to Buenos Aires, Argentina. That makes absolutely no sense. So then my next question was, what feedback did you give to the AI? Did you tell it that it was incorrect? She said no. And I think that's one of the most critical parts of why we need to get back to basics and learn how to process map. And that's what we're going to try and do today, is to develop with the AI tools, what is the optimal plan to get from LA to Buenos Aires, Argentina, and we'll fine tune and get an entire itinerary planned out by the end of this video. So if this is of interest to you, please, I would appreciate it so much if you take just 1 second, click the like button so we can get to more people. So what do I mean here? What we're trying to achieve is a travel itinerary. Now, more importantly, you need to get more specific than that, right? The itinerary is going to go from LAX to, I believe it's EZE, right? And then there's more levels of detail that we need to get to. Who is this for? I'm addressing Gen Z because I believe this is one of the most critical skills that we have lost, and many people don't even know what it is. Why it's important? We need to use logic with the AI tools to get the best output from the AI, and we need to have feedback loops, and we'll talk about that. And how are we going to do it? Well, we're going to do it right here. So you might want to do this yourself with grabbing a piece of paper. And I always recommend, before you go in to use an AI tool, have at least a general workflow or a process map, which is what we're going to be doing here. You always have the inputs, you always have the outputs. But underneath this process, you have controls and you have the mechanisms. And for purposes of this workshop, the controls, I'm going to use Claude. So the controls we are going to have are going to be the project instructions and as well as the skills. Actually, the skills is going to be a mechanism, Claude skills. Now let's talk about the inputs. What are all the things that the process is making travel itinerary? Now, What my friend likes to do might not be what you like to do, so you're going to have to customize it. Underneath this, you can also consider this kind of like the agent or the AI. But underneath this, you have a lot of sub-agents, which we need to customize. I don't know how many yet because this is a workshop that we are doing here, but let's think about what are all the inputs that you would go through in your mind when trying to make a itinerary that is accurate. Because one thing I think most people are not talking about when it comes to AI is you have to remember it's not validated. And validated means that whatever you set up, you have demonstrated repeatability that gets you the same quality of result as the output. So that example where it routed her through Europe to get to a place near Antarctica was a perfect example where the output was completely way off. But did we have all the right inputs is the question. Another example, just to make it very clear, I used AI once to make a recipe, and I was trying to use a new slow cooker that I had purchased, but I didn't know what to make with it. So I said, let me see if the AI can generate a recipe for the slow cooker. And I had acceptance criteria in there that fine-tuned it to what I would guess was the best output possible. So I went ahead and I made the recipe, and I noticed in the process of it that it left out ingredients throughout the refinements. So I do want to note before I forget, the acceptance criteria is a control. So I cooked the recipe, and what ended up happening, I noticed that my kitchen started smelling really bad, and then it started like smelling really bad throughout my entire home. And I was like, there's no way that this can possibly be this bad. But I was assuming I'm going to stick with the recipe. I'm going to follow through. And at the very end, when I was done, I had a very fancy looking polenta dish. But I have to say, it was one of the worst tasting meals I think I've ever had. So I needed to give the feedback to the AI in order to refine it. Now, there's several ways that you could actually do that by having it simulate that it's giving the recipe out and you're trying it out without actually cooking it. And I'll get into that, but that's another control that we can add, simulations and panels. So with panels, sometimes what I'll do with the AI is I'll tell it, before giving me any output, I want you to present this to two people that are really good at this. And I could, in this particular case, because I don't have someone that I know that is well known, that is an expert in making travel itineraries. But as I think through that, we can look up who is really good at travel documentaries. And then I would say, tell the AI, present it to these two individuals. I want them both to critique it, debate the critiques between those two people, and refine your output until they have graded it A+. Or you could say until they have both agreed that this is a 10 out of 10 itinerary. But the panels, it's important that you pick people that are really good in that area. So we're building here our controls, things that we have to consider before moving forward. Think about the inputs. So you're creating an itinerary for someone that is, let's say, the age of the person, the sex of the person, the hobbies that they like to do, maybe it's the type of work that they do, right? And then you're going to want to tell it the departure, but get more specific, departure time, preferred airport. And there will be other things that you want to put into the input, but don't forget, what's the destination? Stopovers, what's preferred? Perhaps you want to also add loyalty programs. Maybe they have already preferred status on Delta or some other airline that they want to use. Doesn't mean that the AI has to pick it, but you're basically you're building a profile of the traveler. You also may need transportation to the airport, okay? So those are the inputs. Now, technically, for some of these, you could build sub-agents, but we'll keep it simple for now. Now, what is what are going to be the outputs that we desire. So we want a itinerary, and the criteria for the itinerary, let's say the total trip must be less than $5,000. It must be verified by experts for accuracy. It should be fun, relaxing. It should be paced. And it may, in her particular case, she mentioned she needed a digital detox. Okay. Which reminds me, you might want to consider under the hobbies, she loves spa, facials. She likes wine tasting. Okay. So the entire point is to put it on paper first. Things that you want it to always do under project instructions would be things like do not make up information, always cite source links, always provide a guide to each itinerary activity, and always provide where to buy. And we'll fine tune that once we get onto the computer. So this is how we're going to do it. We've mapped it out. We put it on paper. We are going to develop the acceptance criteria before it gives us the output. We may want to include simulations, actually creating someone that follows the travel itinerary simulated that has the exact same profile of the traveler, maybe one or two different people that have the same profile of the traveler, and actually have it run through the simulations itself, grade it, refine it, identify what that simulated person didn't like, and then refine it again. So that's what we're going to do today. If you like this type of structure, this format, please do me a favor, subscribe to the channel, hit the alarm bell notification, and let's get into the computer part of the workshop.